know this. I'm live. Okay, I'm live on YouTube. Now I kind of know what to do. Oh, what a relief. Hi, everyone. Okay. If you've ever wondered, gee, I wonder what Nick Dagan Best is like when he's throwing a tantrum. Well, now you have your answer and we can move on. Okay. Fantastic. Okay. Well, how you doing, Watson? Félicitations. Well done. Spoken like a true astrologer. My face registers no shock or surprise. No, I think this pseudoscience bunch of claptrap and yeah. Well, I think the 10-year anniversary really sort of channels into the Jupiter Saturn thing. At that point, once you make it to 10 years, you're in that Jupiter Saturn cycle of growth and retraction, and I mean the kind of the big deal ebb and flow. At 10 years is 10 years. Like that's exactly. Decadic, yeah. Is that a word? Decadic. Decadic should be a word if it isn't one. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, things are generally good. You and I are exploring AI, so I'm spending a lot of time learning how to do various things with it, all related to astrology in one fashion or another. But yeah, a lot of different stuff. So and sort of simultaneously, like trying to learn how to make videos with AI, learn how to use the ephemeris with AI, and other sort of research related projects. And so yeah, I mean, it's sort of we're very much in a cocoon phase, but it feels like every week that passes, I'm my great brain has grown just a little bit, and I've made it just a little bit further into this new world that we're entering. Yeah, yeah. Sure. Yeah, I'm just finishing Andrew Hodge's biography of Alan Turing, which is called, that the movie was made of his life called The Imitation Game. And now that we're fully in the sort of AI world, it's a perfect time for me to have read this book because this is exactly like what you mentioned with AI. It's very much playing an imitation game. It's pretending to understand things that it doesn't really, which, yeah, I see that. Well, there are watches again now. But I mean, I get what the whole, I mean, there's it, in terms of it being overhyped. If all you're doing is reading about it, then yes, it certainly is, overhyped because there's a lot of chatter about it now. Like you said, it's a paradigm shift, and we're suddenly in a world where everyone is talking about it, whereas not long ago barely anyone knew it was happening. It was just sort of aware in the background that they were developing it, but it wasn't really, unless you were really involved, that's all it was. So that sort of the public face of it is getting a lot of hype, and that's bound to be sort of overhyped. But we're just sort of playing with it, and dealing with the reality of it. So it's not so much a matter like once you're actually working with the technology, um, you have a sense that yeah, okay, of what the realities are, what the parameters are so far. But you certainly get a sense that the development is happening quickly. And I mean, I as of this past week, we finally reached a level where we can see we're getting to where we wanted to be, sort of at least starting off. The fact that 2 weeks ago I thought, okay, having the AI sort of, have the ephemeris down, have the ephemeris in its you know in its knowledge base or whatever, that was something that we were still sort of aspiring to. 2 weeks ago, that was still something like, oh, it would be great if we could do that. Well, now we've got that. You know, and I wanted AI to be able to read whatever text I've fed to it. And well, that's apparently been available for longer, but I'm only just catching up on those grounds. So, I mean, hype or no hype, yeah, I'm pretty good at tuning out hype, but in terms of what we're actually, working with day to day, yeah, there's something there. I find it exciting. I don't feel I have to oversell it, but it feels like we're getting somewhere. All right, Zeke. Oh, these people, they're so, oh my God, it's just, oh. I, Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I get his point. I'm having a laugh at his expense, but, yeah, I get that. Yeah, there you go, there you go. Pre-electricity, I would say. What Uranus is when you start, having coal firing, steam, coal, all that stuff. Mm. Yeah, no, no, Mercury is a lot, Mercury figures out that if you put a saddle on a horse and ride it, you can transport yourself somewhere, or it invents the wheel. Um, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I- yeah, I Well, I mean, the modern planets are just that. They're modern. They represent all the different ways that our reality has been changing since the 1700s. I mean, in many ways, I don't mind saying I in some ways, I mean, I wouldn't limit Uranus to this, but I don't think it's inaccurate to say Uranus equals the USA. And by that I mean everything that the American Revolution introduced to our culture. I mean, I've talked about this a bit before, but the no, it's exactly. It's the Industrial Revolution in all the ways. This is why I'm saying, the steam engine and the coal fueled and everything that fell from there. Uranus was within a couple of years of Uranus being discovered, we had the hot air balloon going into the sky. The first time that human beings actually like went into the sky, flew. Uh, um, oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, 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 yeah. The founding of NASA in July of '57 is a Sun Uranus chart. Yeah. And absolutely. So I think, I think of Uranus being this very modern planet that's, we've just like since the American Revolutionary War, history has just been this ongoing cycle of technological development, but also political revolution. I've said this before. I consider the American Revolutionary War to be part of this greater sort of series of, like the revolution, the global revolution has been happening. It's one event that's been happening for 250 years. That started with the Revolutionary War in America and split. Then you had France and Haiti, and then you had, Napoleon invades the Iberian countries, and then so then Latin America rebels against Spain and Portugal, and then Greece does revolt against the Ottoman Empire, and it just goes on and on and on, and eventually you get to Russia, and eventually you get to China, and so on and so forth. And this is sort of this ongoing Uranian process that we've been going through since the American Revolutionary War. um, you can still see it, but it changed the minute we became aware of it. It coincided with us becoming aware of a lot of other things that just were unthinkable prior to that. So yeah, no, I don't think it's sort of this absolute thing that like until we discovered Uranus, it had no astrological influence at all. But I do think our discovery of it, our becoming aware, our becoming aware of it is synchronized with everything else that was happening politically and technologically at that time. That really, like I said, I think it's all part of this one sort of long event. What's really a global event. Uh, well, it's still very new. Like I mean, Pluto still has two more ingresses into Aquarius to make. You know what I mean? Like it's there now, but it's about to wander back into Capricorn this month, and there are going to be two more entries into Aquarius following this exit. So it's yeah. This is we're I mean we're definitely we've got our toes in this new ocean, but it's going to be up to our knees soon, and then so on and so forth. Yeah. Oh, I think so. Yeah. And yeah, and immigration in the modern sense. When Neptune was discovered in 1846, it immediately preceded the 1848 revolutions in Europe, and this is when you really which also it was also the potato famine with the Irish, but you had Italians and Germans and Poles. Getting caught up in revolutions in Europe, and a lot of them having to leave and emigrating to America. And it's really when you start to see the melting pot. I mean, up until the 1840s, America is just, you know, like, you know, white guys from the British Isles, or they're slaves from Africa, and of course the indigenous people who were already here. And then in the 1840s, it really becomes this sort of, the beginning of that melting pot. And I think that's a big part of Neptune as well. Certainly, there's this one week in January of 1848. There's a bunch of things that happen in the same week that all in their own way relate to Neptune and its discovery. Maybe if you don't mind, I'll share my screen and go into these. All right. Uh-oh, Nick's putting on the glasses. You know it's serious now. The old man's got the glasses on. Oh no. Oh no. Oh geez. Okay, so where am I going here? Okay. See, when we have this connected to AI, it's going to be so much more dope than this slow ass solar fire. This Well, yeah, no, I mean, I remember in 1999 when I got solar fire, I was so excited. This was cutting edge technology, and I do still love it. But it's got further to go, I'd say, uh, or we're about to sort of cross into this new world. All right, so a bunch of things happen all in the same week. This is all in the same week, which is crazy. Um, oh, yeah, I'll put up a four wheel just to start. Okay, so between January 24th and 1848 and February 2nd, 1848, there's a few things that are happening here. On the 24th of January, gold is discovered in California, which is particularly galling because on the 2nd of February is the day that the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo is signed, which ends the U.S.-Mexican War. In other words, the gold was found in California just like days before this treaty that would give the U.S. California is signed. Like if Spain had managed to hold on to California, they could have had that gold, if you catch my drift. But this is really the California gold rush. I said Uranus kind of equals America. Well, I think in some ways Neptune equals California, or it equals anyway that allure to go west and reinvent yourself. Much as, like I was saying, the Europeans are going to come over in 1848. They're going to come to America to do what? To live the American dream, to reinvent themselves. But at the same time, you have these people who are already Americans living on the East Coast, and they hear the California gold rush, and they go west to find their fortune, to carve their piece of the American dream and all that stuff. And California still sort of has that allure to people, in the United States, and I think in the world. It maybe is less California gold rush and more, for a long time it was Hollywood or what have you. But there is something about going, it's part of the, that sort of Tom Joad Grapes of Wrath thing, too. You're going west. You're going to find your dream. So that whole thing is I think part of the Neptune story. Secondly, there's Henry David Thoreau gave this lecture in Concord, Massachusetts, called Civil Disobedience, which he winds up then translating into a pamphlet. And this is basically the idea of passive resistance, of not passive. Gandhi actually hated passive resistance, nonviolent resistance to protest. This whole idea, this idea that would inspire Gandhi, Martin Luther King, for a while Mandela, although he eventually had to renege on it. But the idea of fighting oppression nonviolently, coming from Henry David Thoreau the same week. And then finally, as you mentioned, communism. Indeed, Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto in Belgium during the same week that Thoreau is giving his talk, the same week that the gold is being discovered, the same week that the treaty is being signed. And this is just as all these revolutions are breaking out across, like within a week or two, what happens in France, and then it starts happening in Hungary and parts of Italy. Italy isn't even Italy yet. It's a bunch of different disparate places. All over the place, all over Europe, there are these sort of revolutions breaking out. And although none of them are really successful as such, they do sort of change the board around them. They move things around, they move the players around the board, I'm trying to say. And yeah, the Irish potato famine that's also sending a lot of Irish people to the US and Canada. So that's it in some sort of intangible way. That's or that's one way I like to express or how I see Neptune. Sorry, I'm looking for my window now. Where's my? There's my restream window. Um, yeah, that's part of what Neptune means to me. And it's funny you mentioned Chiron. People always want you to. It was discovered November. It was just it was discovered November 1st, 1977. It was discovered the same day that the Sex Pistols released "Never Mind the Bollocks." Here's the Sex Pistols. It was released the same day that Queen released "News of the World," which is "We Will Rock You, We Are the Champions." At one point, I did. I had an old lecture on Chiron I did, and it was called "Anarchist Punk from Outer Space." Uh, and the reason for this now, when we look at bodies like this, do you mind if I share my screen again? Yeah. Um, people sometimes want to ask about Chiron. It's natural to be sort of curious about it. This is my take on it. Um, the other bodies, when they were discovered, part of what they signify, you really see come alive when that same planet is crossing into one of the cardinal points, going from mutable from a mutable sign to a cardinal sign. And I'm always curious about what that body is doing, during that part of the transit. I'll explain what I mean in a minute. So this is the chart for Chiron's discovery. Like I said, the 1st of November, 1977. And maybe I should show Chiron in my. Yeah, I know where to go. you. Yeah, I know. I'm having a laugh. I've been using this software longer than a lot of our viewers have been alive. So here's Chiron in Taurus on the day it's discovered. And you can see it was like opposite the sun. So, I mean, this is why it would be sort of easier to spot. And it's for a long time, Chiron, has this really weird orbit where it spends like a decade in Aries, but only a year in Scorpio. So when it's in Aries and Taurus, it spends a long time in these signs. And because of that, while it was in Aries and Taurus in the 60s and 70s, it was sort of in this long opposition to Uranus for quite a bit of time, including when it was discovered. Now, Chiron's at Taurus here. If you go back, to me, the starting point for Chiron in terms of when we're starting to analyze it is the prior to its discovery. When did it get to the cardinal point? And the answer to that is its ingress into Aries on the 31st of March, 1968. So what's happening at this time? There are a few things. Yes, exactly. Right here, 4 days later, okay, Martin Luther King is killed. Another thing that happens is just prior to that, where am I here? Oh, yes. 2001, A Space Odyssey, Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece, premieres in Washington, D.C. Now, I'll get back to Dr. King in a minute, but 2001, A Space Odyssey, what's it about, right? It's for those of you who haven't seen it, it's hard to summarize, but it's about sort of human beings search for and at least or something even bigger than aliens, the answers, I mean, but yes, basically the story culminates in a space probe going out to Jupiter, and this the lone survivor basically sort of falling into the strange, peculiar grasp of these aliens who it's hard to describe. It's all kind of psychedelic, but it's about like sort of searching for those big answers, and yet the kind of answers that we would only find by finding either aliens or God with a capital G. So there's that element to it, and there is the murder of Dr. King, and and everything that sort of, I mean, that event alone certainly changes the United States in some ways more than anything else, or at least equal to the JFK murders. Now, if we go back to 77, oh yeah, another thing. I'm sorry, one other thing I wanted to talk about in 68 before I go there. Within a month of Chiron's discovery, in May of 68, we start getting these riots in Paris. Okay. There we are, the Paris student riots. These are, you'll sometimes hear boomer intellectuals talk about being 68 retards, which is, the 68ers. The 68 Paris, the 68, the year of my birth, was a year of revolutions all over the world. Mexico City, Paris, a lot of, obviously, as we know, a lot of American cities, all over the place. Revolution was really brewing. It was a very revolutionary period. But the Paris revolutions are sort of or the Paris riots, rather, or uprisings, however we want to call them, tend to be sort of the cultural sort of center point of all these revolutions. Yeah, same time there were student revolts at Columbia University, for instance. But the Paris thing is really important. Now, as the Paris student riots are happening, there's all kinds of students from all over who are participating. And included in the people who are participating in the Paris student riots it's a young British couple. The guy's name is Malcolm McLaren, and the woman's name is Vivienne Westwood. And they're taking part in the Paris student riots, and they notice some of the protesters are flying the black flag, the flag of anarchy, and they find this really appealing. They're both sort of designers, aspiring designers, and that black flag, the anarchy of the Paris revolts, they find really, not just sort of inspiring, but they love the aesthetic attached to that. So they go back to London, and they eventually open a fetish clothing store called Sex. And Malcolm McLaren comes up with this idea that in order to promote their S&M leather gear, that he'll get like a young rock band that'll like model these clothes. And there are these, punky kids hanging out. Actually, punk isn't even really the term for them yet. But that, spoiler alert, that's what they will be called. So these four of the kids who hang out at this S&M shop, these sort of, juvenile delinquent kind of kids. I'm not trying to be overly mean. Four sort of wayward London kids who know how to play instruments a bit, start a little band, and Malcolm McLaren's going to be their manager, and they're going to promote his store, and he calls them the Sex Pistols. Maybe you've heard of them. And when their album comes out, it's released the same day that Chiron is discovered. There is something about this sort of anarchic revolutionary spirit that I think is also connected to Chiron. It's not revolution in the Uranus sense, although when it was discovered, like I said, there was this ongoing opposition to Uranus. Sorry, I'll go back to 68 for a second to illustrate that. No matter where you click for this period, it's not normal. It's not like Chiron is perpetually opposite Uranus, but for a very, very, very long time. See, here it is. When Chiron's just about to go into Aries, Uranus is up there at the end of Virgo. That's 9 years earlier. And so there's something about Chiron's, first of all, the fact that it was discovered while it was in this ongoing opposition to Uranus, and this connection to like an inspiration that happened when it was crossing the cardinal point, and a sort of manifestation of that, when the body was actually discovered. Now, there's something else that happened in November of 1977. Remember, I was telling you about Stanley Kubrick, 2001. Right. So what else happens? A little movie called Close Encounters of the Third Kind with Steven Spielberg, which and Star Wars had just come out the previous May. You can sort of, but I think Close Encounters is even, both Star Wars and Close Encounters owe their sort of technological accomplishment to what Kubrick did with 2001. Just the depicting space in such a realistic looking, way, and yeah, just the technology of it in the spaceships and all that stuff. But Close Encounters, yep, 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 exactly, exactly, which happens in 16. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. But I think Close Encounters is a sort of, stepchild, if you will, of 2001: A Space Odyssey. I mean, it's asking a lot of the same questions that 2001 was, albeit in more of a Spielberg, kind of, dazzling spectacle way, as opposed to a Kubrick, uh, uh, sort of. But I don't know. Yeah, yeah, that's one way to put it. Right. Sure. Right. But they always make one hell of a jazz band, which I always find, like, astounding, field music and spirituals, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I do Adolphe Sax literally, I've even got a file on him. Believe it or not, the inventor of the saxophone, his name is Adolphe Sax. I've been to his hometown and I've been to his grave in Paris. He's originally from Belgium, but he moves to, yeah, there we are. Um, it is. Look, he did. Yeah, yeah. No, not at all. I'll show it in a sec. I just wanted to quickly answer, I may have confused people by I didn't mean to suggest Chiron was visible to the naked eye, but when it's opposite the sun, it's gonna be brighter and easier to spot with the telescope. That's all I meant by that. Let me quickly, just one more time for now, go back to my screen. I wanna show you, Adolphe Sax. So indeed, like, the patent for the saxophone, July 22nd, 1846. That's within 2 months of Neptune's discovery. It's a very and the whole thing about Neptune, you can see there was a Saturn Neptune conjunction too. Um, the whole thing about the saxophone becoming an instrument in jazz um, is also kind of a Neptunian story. The saxophone wasn't a big success when Adolphe Sax invented it. There were like 16 variants. There were variants on the clarinet. Obviously, it's a reed instrument, and the fingering's sort of similar. But he had these like there were 16 kinds of saxophone. Usually these days there's maybe four. There's the soprano, alto, tenor, and baritone. But he had 16 varieties, and it wasn't a huge success. He had to keep fighting lawsuits, people trying to steal his patent. Um, but because it was not a big success, it wound up being treated as it was the instrument that a clown would play in a circus while maybe riding around in a small car or something. It's a clown's instrument. It's kind of a exactly. But because it's treated as a kind of joke, because it's kind of a discarded thing, it's not expensive, and therefore budding young African American musicians can actually get their hands on the thing. And with that in mind, it's only going to be a generation or two before you get a Charlie Parker, arguably one of the greatest musical mind of the 20th century. Was certainly a runner-up. And so, yeah, that's another sort of element of what happens with Neptune. And I think also that melting pot I was talking about earlier, the 1848, all those all that immigration. Um, Jazz is very much it's an African American music form, but like African American. It's not like you couldn't have gone into the Congo and they would invent jazz. It had to be in this, sure, it's invented by African Americans, but in the context of European instruments, European chordal structures, European melodies, and African Americans absorbing that and churning out this amazing art form, which in turn goes to sort of continue to innovate, music further and furthermore, because you can draw this line. You can go like I mentioned Charlie Parker. Well, he had an 18-year-old Miles Davis play in his band. Miles Davis eventually will introduce modal music into jazz, which is the basis for all you kids who go to the clubs and listen to music that goes boop boop bop bop and has no melody whatsoever. That comes from Miles Davis and modal stuff. Like it's everything that follows. Yeah, yeah. Vinny P75 just made an excellent little observation that it seems so obvious. I can't believe it didn't occur to me right away. But yes, he says, or they say, the association of Chiron with punk rock is fascinating. The mutilation of the body was such a big thing with the Sex Pistols, Sid Vicious, who was a Taurus. And that makes me think of Chiron and Taurus. Yeah, absolutely right. There's something very much about the sort of sticking the clothespin in your nose kind of thing of punk rock. Sure. Yeah. 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 I'm not trying to look pretty. I'm not trying to look presentable. I'm not trying. Yeah, actually, it gets really interesting. Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, Uranus is in Scorpio every 84 years, but that particular passage, it had the Chiron opposition. Yeah, I think you have to take them as a sort of as a pair. Yeah, I'm actually just putting his chart up now. If yeah, well, here he is. This is his chart in the middle, and because you brought up Uranus and Scorpio, when he was unfortunately this terrible event when he killed his girlfriend Nancy Spungen. This was this. I was just telling a client about this. The autumn of 1978 is a crazy time. We have this Venus is about to go retrograde in Scorpio. Mars and Uranus are in Scorpio. Okay, this autumn of 1978. I mean, this is Sid killing Nancy. So yeah, I mean, talk about all this stuff going on in his first house. Look at Chiron here on his descendant. Indeed, he's very much a seventh house kind of guy. But look at all this other stuff going on in 1978. That's sort of like the peak of all this stuff. We have, during this Venus retrograde, we have things like, what am I looking for here? Yeah, there we are. The murder of Harvey Milk in San Francisco. Which and the designing of the rainbow flag, which happens right around now. Whenever you get like Venus retrograde in the same sign as Uranus, reminds me of 1777 when the Stars and Stripes, Betsy Ross, and all that. That was Venus retrograde in Gemini with Uranus and Gemini. Something about flags. I don't know. Go figure. Prior to the murder of Moscone, there was the Jonestown massacre, right? I mean, talk about drinking the Kool-Aid, and literally, you can see the Venus retrograde there, the Uranus there, the Sun in Scorpio, and there was other stuff. Just the culture was really kooky. This was the time of the. I'm not sure if I have the chart or not. I'm looking for the Star Wars holiday special, like or like I mean you had to you had to be my age, like I was 10 years old this time, but it was really weird. We had the Doctor Strange TV show, which was totally batshit crazy, although not bad. You had Kiss Meets the Phantom. Of course, we were all big Kiss fans, and you had this really poorly made superhero movie with Kiss as the superheroes. The start. Yeah, this is all Venus retrograde. This is all the autumn of 78. This is all Venus retrograde in Scorpio with her. Oh yeah, there's a lot of Venus retrograde stuff in their timeline. Yeah, their first gig was during a Venus retrograde. Then the next Venus retrograde is the release of their live album, which was made them famous. Yeah, I can go into that, but that's a whole, we're on punk now. We'll go to metal later. But my point being this period in 1978, that Venus retrograde in Scorpio with the Uranus. Yeah, it's the Doctor Strange show. It's Kiss Meets the Phantom. It's the Star Wars holiday special. It's Sid killing Nancy, Jonestown, Harvey Milk, Rainbow Flag. I don't know. Go figure. But it's a really peculiar time in that whole timeline when everything just goes really bananas. Yeah. Oh dear. Are we? Do we have tension? Do we have tension? No, man. I think I've been the hog. I think they're not necessarily wrong, but I think it's on me. Wow, they said it twice. Yeah, so there you go. I'm hogging this time. I don't feel any tension. But if we're upsetting people, then we'll be like that. You remember those two chipmunks? After you, no, after you. Oh, I do declare you must go first. No, after you. Yeah. Disco. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm disco, I mean, disco was an interesting culture. Like, on the one hand, it was a real sort of melting pot. It was African Americans, gays. So I get, well, yeah. I mean, but exactly, exactly. But then it also had this real sort of elitist vibe to it at the same time. It was appropriated by a sort of, Studio 54 was not for the hoi polloi necessarily, unless they happened to be attractive. It was okay to be poor as long as you looked good in your shiny silk pants or whatever. Um, yeah, no, it really does. And Steve Rubell, the founder of Studio 54, was a Sagittarius. The club was founded in the during the Venus retrograde of 1977, the one in Aries. That was when the club opened. And my recollection is that I think they I know they got busted, and I think the first time that they got into legal trouble was during the retrograde I'm talking about in 78. Mhm. Yeah. You're right. Absolutely. Right. Right. Well, I mean, listen, if you'd known me at the age of 22, I was saying I was into that before it was cool, before saying I was into that was cool, but was cool. uh, y- well, I mean, I'm literally, in the early 90s, I was a DJ at a bar called Biff Tech here in Montreal. And it was in that same bar that Vice magazine was founded. Gavin McInnes and Shane Smith, they were Sarouche, they were at a table a few feet from me when I was DJing in this bar. And these are the guys who literally, like, the reason that whole culture blew up started with that magazine. Well, yeah, but I mean, no, listen, I also hated Gavin McInnes long before it was cool. uh, he and I have a lot of mutual friends, but none of those mutual friends, some of whom were very close to him, none of them like him anymore. But I was hating him from the get go. So I was always, I'm the, yeah, exactly, exactly. I know that. Don't let the gray beard throw you off. But it's funny what you're mentioning, because that shift that you're talking about, of course, happened in those early '90s when with the conjunction of Uranus and Neptune, because it was Uranus that caught up with Neptune, made a conjunction, and then moved on ahead. But what was that conjunction in the early '90s? I mean, I remember this so well. It was grunge, but look, I mean, Kurt Cobain. The whole thing was he wanted to be Uranus, but he had to deal with the Neptune conjunction. He didn't necessarily, like, he couldn't cope with that Neptune factor of it, the mainstream of it all. I remember, this really great memory. I met a cousin of mine who I'd never met before, and it was in Victoria, BC. I was 23 and he was 18, but he was from Hawaii. So where he was from, he wasn't old enough to be in a bar, but suddenly he was in Canada where he was old enough to go to a bar. So I took him to this like dance club just so he could be in a bar for the first time. And it was your classic sort of early 90s dance club. It was like a dance club. But because Smells Like Teen Spirit was such a huge hit, they had to play it. And I remember the dance floor cleared and I was just like dancing. It was like me and like a couple of other people just like loving the fact that the dance club had to play Smells Like Teen Spirit. There was this real sort of, it was a real collision of, yeah, underground culture and mainstream. And it was, and the fact that there was this sort of clash between the two sort of aesthetic virtues, if you will, was part of what made it what it was, and for better and or worse. But indeed, since the '90s, Uranus has moved on, and now it's sort of the avant, the force ahead of the times. Yeah, or they released their first album around then. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Radiohead's first album came out in '93. Yeah. Tool, who I love. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can. That I when I that I'm glad Don Rask likes that phrase because I said it, I'm like, does that make sense? Am I talking nonsense? I'm glad. Anyway, it sounds nice. um, right, right. I mean, I think this is kind of a tangent, but like think like in the '60s, right? You know, the Beatles first they were all like "Love Me Do" and I want to hold my hand, but eventually they're "I Am the Walrus" and "Revolution Number 9." Um, Oh yeah, yeah. Book time with me to talk about '90s music. That's my kind of conversation. Um, yeah, like the Beatles started off, of course, like just being like the Neptune and Scorpio, like woo. But they sort of they became a lot more avant-garde as time went along. Like in other words, Neptune preceded the Uranus. First, you had the Neptune force, and then that allowed them. I mean, think of if they didn't have the power they had, the clout that. Sure. I I gotta go to the database again. I'm sorry. I gotta. Okay, no one everyone calm down. We're not fighting. I'm not interrupting him, or I hope I'm not. But no, but because no, but what you're saying about Uranus in Leo, you don't know how right you are, but it's even more remarkable because to my mind, one of the most defining things, it's in November of 1961 that Uranus makes its first ingress into Virgo. And that same week, just as it's going into Virgo, is the day that Brian Epstein, um, you know, yeah, not Jeffrey, not Jeffrey. Brian Epstein, who will be the manager of the Beatles. That it's like within days of, you can see Uranus entered Virgo November 1st. This is November 9th, and this posh, gay Jewish record store manager with theatrical training. Because he manages a record store, he's heard these orders for a record by this group called the Beatles, who he thinks they're German because the record comes from Hamburg, and then he discovers they're from Liverpool. That they play every lunch hour at a little club a few blocks from his record store. So he goes over for lunchtime and he goes to see this band, and he's dazzled by what he sees. And this is the beginning of the '60s, as far as music is concerned. Well, no, that's a bit arrogant, obviously, but Motown is only just sort of starting to happen at this time too. But as far as the Beatles are concerned, yeah, Uranus is going into Virgo, and this is when they're going from being, the rough guys in leather. Sound familiar? I mean, the Beatles were totally a punk band. When Brian Epstein sees them, they're in leather, they smoke, they're totally indifferent to, they talk on stage, they eat on stage. He's the guy who sort of refines them and Neptunizes them. Just sort of, I was struck when you were talking about the Uranus in Leo thing. Mm, right. Michael Caine, Cockney. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, again, I mean, I mentioned Michael Caine and Cockney, but that really is like, the Beatles, of course, are Scouse. They're from Liverpool. They're not supposed to, in the British narrative, they're not supposed to do anything other than be dock workers and the butt of jokes, and so like the whole idea of these guys from Liverpool, are you kidding me? And or Michael Caine as a Cockney being a movie star. It's this sort of cultural turnaround. It's kind of the big joke, like the Beatles were, people knew them as these like sort of well, yeah, but they were presented as being really sort of clean and well scrubbed, when really they were these rough guys from Liverpool, whereas the Rolling Stones were presented as being right. The Beatles, the Stones were represented as being their antithesis. They were like these rude guys who didn't dress in matching suits, but they were from like comfortable, well, middle class homes. So there's this, like it's like the middle class guys pretending to be rough and working class, and the working class guys pretending to be refined and middle class. Um, uh, and you see this a lot. I mean, Motown too. Like Motown is this massive African American musical explosion. But in the mid '60s, Berry Gordy has the Supremes and Marvin Gaye playing at like supper clubs. Like the whitest venues imaginable. Everyone's trying to like sort of, or everyone is just like sort of aiming to some other part of the culture. Uh, uh, if you're rich and privileged, you're trying to look poor and struggling. If you're poor and struggling, you're trying to look rich and privileged. Or yeah, if you're a white musician, you're trying to sound black. If you're a black musician, you're trying to fit in the white aesthetic. There's all this crossing over that happens, and then you get to the murder of Dr. King, and it's just that ends, and everything sort of diverges in its own direction after that, which is interesting too. Yeah. It's kind of we're talking about far more interesting things than ourselves. But okay, to satisfy curiosity, I have Uranus in the second house, And no matter what house system you use, and I have Neptune in the fourth house, no matter what house system you use. 87 is so uncool. I mean, you had, you had Butthole Surfers, you had the Replacements, but I mean, even Jane's Addiction hadn't happened yet. Public Enemy was just starting to happen. Some things were heating up. In '88, we got Jane's Addiction. To me, '88 is when you really started to get cool music. The first Nirvana album was '88. Pixies, all that stuff that I loved. Yeah. World music. Think of, Peter Gabriel doing all this stuff. Live Aid, right? I mean, like that's yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like holy moly, holy moly. Yeah. It occurred to me when just to go back a bit, when you mentioned Neptune and Sagittarius and punk and disco, we left out the third leg of that trifecta. Reggae mon, which absolutely was super important in the late '70s. Really, until Bob Marley died in the spring of '81, but reggae changed a lot. It was very influential for the punks, the Clash in particular. But they all loved it. Even the Pistols never made reggae music, but they were really into it. Um, and yeah, and that's also, I mean, Neptune and Sagittarius. First of all, we're getting that sort of that international vibe, but also yeah, Peter Tosh, who was in the Wailers and then went solo. PIL, okay, yeah. I'm getting some pushback there. Maybe PIL was a little more reggae than the Sex Pistols. But you catch where I'm going with that. The other thing is reggae is really. I know what PIL stands for. I'm probably older than you. A public image. So okay, yes, crush. That's a little yeah, that's a little bit later, just a little bit later, and we're not trying to leave it out. We're just talking about one thing at a time. We can get into the Sisters Mercy and Cocteau Twins, but then this conversation will never end. But reggae, the thing about Neptune being in Sagittarius, reggae is spiritual music. I mean, it is Rastafarianism is make no mistake about it. I would love to see like a real Rastafarian debate the Bible with one of these Christian fundamentalists. They would they would be left in the dust. They know their good book very, very well. Oh, okay. Vinny P is telling you what PIL stands for. Okay. All right. Yeah. God, this is fun. This is how this live stream was supposed to be. Instead of, you see, it started off with my punk rock tantrum when I couldn't. Oh, he's a Gen X guy. Okay, you're one of us, right? One of us. One of us. Gabba gabba hey. Um, all right. All ages welcome, of course. Yeah, this live stream started with me throwing a tantrum that things wouldn't work, which was almost sort of, I want to pretend punk rock in its own right. Guys who look like me really have no claim to ever being punk rock again. But once upon a time, back in the day. Yeah, yeah, there was. Oh no, go ahead. Okay. Right. Sure. Sure. And think of like the last time Uranus was in Taurus, it was in the Great Depression. So the movies, you had a lot of these musicals like Busby Berkeley and things that were really escapist. You didn't want things too depressing. You were going to the movies to like, forget your troubles for a little while. So it was kind of the same thing. It was very sort of wholesome. And you had a code right when Uranus went into Taurus in 1934. You got the Hayes Code, which actually insisted that, that cinema be more sort of, yeah, censored, you know. Oh, okay. Right. Yep. Right. Yeah. Yeah, Lizzo definitely has a kind of intimacy even in the biggest sort of setting. Yeah, yeah, there's this sort of sense of like you can see she's playing these huge places, but yeah, there's a real sort of connection to the artist one feels. And she played that old flute. Yeah. Unless you ask Ben Shapiro, but he can go screw himself. Yeah. Forms and yeah. Yeah, no, I'm gonna blow your mind, Watson. You were saying you were saying you didn't know the last time Uranus and Neptune were conjunct. Well, let's talk a little bit about that because it is kind of interesting, and you're actually going to be more of an expert than I am on this, because the no, 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 well, I'll know some things, but when it gets to the music, it's going to be you. You know why? Because we are talking Beethoven, baby. 1820s. Um, yeah, Uranus. He was composing his Ninth Symphony. He started writing it a few years earlier. You can see Uranus is separating from Neptune by the time it's performed in 1824. I believe, if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong. This is the performance he conducts himself, and he doesn't know the audience loves it because he's deaf already. Right? Is that okay? Oh, really? Okay. Oh, you're more of a Bach guy, of course. What am I saying? Beethoven is too. Beethoven's too popular, man. You're, okay. Yeah. And I was going to say the real sort of punks, if you will, of the Uranus Neptune conjunction of the late 18 teens, early 1820s. Someone's asking what years they were. It's like more or less 1818 to 1824 or whatever. Maybe a bit broader than that. But the thing is, it's Percy Shelley, it's Lord Byron, Mary Shelley, Frankenstein, and all those poems, and then Shelley and Byron, one after the other, these sort of very mythical deaths that they die young and beautiful and with a big body of amazing creative work behind them. Much like Cobain later on. Um, so yeah, and Beethoven being oh yeah, yeah, not a very happy life. Old Ludwig, yeah. Someone's making fun of you. Classic. I went to school, but I don't know anything about that subject. Millennial fail. Listen, I'm gonna stand up for Watson. You're a formidable musician, and you know quite a bit. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I put you on the spot with Beethoven. I was really sure I was gonna get. I thought I was gonna get a different answer from you. Your father, if I remember correctly, did the soundtrack to Amadeus. Yeah. So right. Uh, uh, that Oh wow. I have to say, I mean, Amadeus is one of my favorite movies, Milos Forman. But I mean, like, what kind of a musician do you have to be that like you're the guy they choose to be Mozart? Like musically, um, that's chapeau, as they say. Yeah, it would take me 13 years just to figure out how all those pedals work. Okay. Yeah, you're funny. I don't know about the other stuff, but you're funny. With the organ? Yeah. 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 Right. Yeah. Well, I think George Bernard Shaw said, "Those who can't do, teach." And then Woody Allen said, "Those who can't teach, teach Jim." Yeah. You were born for this, my friend. Right. Right. Yeah, go figure, huh? Go figure. Well, uh, you there you go. Uh, Crushed Orchids asked an interesting question. Since we're talking about music, any particular configurations come to mind? Um, I would say like the thing is, I mean, I've looked at so many musicians' charts, and you get every kind of chart under the sun. You might get some sense of what the individual brings to their music, but I can't look at a chart and say, oh, this is a musician. They'll have the sun and moon in any of the 12 signs. They'll have the ascendant in any of the 12 signs. They'll have every variety of relationship to Neptune or every variety of relationship to Uranus. It's really, there's no single signature where you can say, okay, these are the musicians' charts, and then everyone else's charts are over there. Astrology is never that, reductible or, yeah, reductive. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 Oh yeah. 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 No, that's amazing. Should I put that up? Okay. Yeah. Coltrane, John Coltrane knew astrology well. He read about it quite a bit. He had one piece called Fifth House. He had another piece called Equinox. His wife also was an amazing jazz pianist who put out a lot of astrologically inspired music. But yeah, he's most famous for Love Supreme. Um, there's a lot of stuff in his story. Um, I should bring up the whole band because whoops, yeah, we're done with Chiron for now. Um, so that's Coltrane. His birth certificate probably says 5 p.m. It could be 3 p.m. It's one of those things like where the five could be a three, but it's probably five. That's my feeling about it. Now, A Love Supreme, he recorded with four musicians specifically. First was the drummer Elvin Jones, who was practically like a co-partner in the band, and then two younger guys. He had McCoy Tyner and Jimmy Garrison. Okay, now what I find interesting about these four musicians, these are the four guys in the John Coltrane Quartet. Um, Coltrane's got Venus at 15 Virgo. His drummer, Elvin Jones, has the Sun and Venus retrograde at Virgo conjunct uh, Coltrane's Venus. And then um, Jimmy Garrison is a Pisces, with like the Mercury retrograde here. He's the bass player. And then finally, what was I going to? Oh yeah, and Garrison's Venus is just coming out of retrograde in Aquarius. So Elvin Jones has Venus retrograde. Garrison is has Venus in the phase just coming out of the retrograde, as does McCoy Tyner, the pianist. This Venus is also just coming out of retrograde in Scorpio. So the three other guys are all Venus retrogrades, like in the phase, and um, and Coltrane's Venus is here. And when the record is released, or recorded rather, I should say, in 1964, there we are. When it's made, we have Uranus, Mars, and Pluto conjunct Coltrane's Venus. You see that? And like I said, so if we go to like Elvin Jones has those planets conjunct his Sun, Venus retrograde, and even just the fact that like the Coltrane's a Libra, but the other three guys in the band are all mutable suns. You've got a Virgo, you've got a Pisces, and a Sagittarius. So it's a real. I mean, this was an amazing band. Just absolute superhumans. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I got to tell you, he's my favorite drummer. And I tried when he was alive, I emailed him back in like 2002, 2003. I emailed him. And then when he died, I emailed his wife, please tell me what time he was born. It's like one of those charts I just, and I'll never have it, but it was something I really, really wanted. Another interesting thing about his story is that McCoy Tyner, who's the youngest guy in the band, happened to be born the exact same day, December 11th, 1938, that John Coltrane's grandfather died. And this was important because when Coltrane was grieving the death of his grandfather, that's when he started practicing his saxophone. Like he had it and he would kind of toot on it a little bit, but like to sort of console himself, he really got serious about the instrument on this day when his grandfather died, which happens to be the same day that his future pianist and I mean McCoy Tyner is also absolutely my favorite piano player ever, and he's born on that day. What a like amazing connection between these musicians. Exactly. I yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, in that beginning intro, he plays the melody in every single key, which is his way of saying this is like it's everywhere. A love supreme is something. It's omni. You play it in every yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's yeah. It's so much of what he did, especially in that period during the Uranus Pluto conjunction on his Venus on Elvin Jones's chart. Like he really after Love Supreme, he really got into some heavy duty music that was just miles. And no matter what Coltrane was doing, people were always like, "Oh, I wish he was doing what he was doing 3 years ago." But like when he had been doing what he was doing 3 years ago, people were like, "Oh, I wish he was doing what he was doing 3 years ago." Like it was always like, like his audience was always sort of like catching up with him. But I Love Supreme really like it connected with people. Yeah, it connected with people in a big, big way. Yep. I probably have the charts for this, wherever we're going. Yeah. I Yeah, because he's an only child. So, the only brothers he's got are John, Paul, and George. That's the beginning of the session. It's the beginning of the session. Right. Oh, for sure. Mm. What do you see when you turn out the lights? I can't tell you, but I know it's mine. Yeah. Yep. It was, and it's another one of these great stories, because it was recorded not long after it was written, but it's also in the middle of it's got so many layers to it, the story. So here's Keith Richards, and okay, so we'll go down to 1965. Funny enough, it's in Clearwater, Florida, future home of the Scientology. Um, so Keith wakes up in his hotel room in Clearwater, Florida, in the middle of the night, and he has this riff in his head, and he grabs his guitar, he turns on his tape recorder, he records the riff, and then he goes back to bed. And he wakes up and he hears it again, and he I think he even comes up with the title "I Can't Get No Satisfaction." He plays it for Mick, and Mick writes the lyrics. And Keith has a natal Mars Uranus conjunction here in Gemini in the eighth, and the song comes to him in a dream, and with Neptune on his ascendant, no less. And then it's a recurrence of the Mars Uranus conjunction on his midheaven, square the natal conjunction. And this is I can't get no satisfaction. Yeah, it's like it's about male frustration, right? It's about a guy who's uh yeah, just like can't be satisfied. There's yeah, yeah, but it's very like sort of male, trying to, just yeah. And it's a distorted guitar riff, it's the beginning of that sort of, well, I Feel Fine by the Beatles was recorded a couple of months earlier, and they say that's got the first sort of feedback on it. But Satisfaction's got this very sort of deliberate, distortion to the guitar that's so distinctive, and it really, yeah, it really sort of signifies the vibe of the song beautifully. And if I'm not mistaken, Brian Jones, the other guitar player in the band, did he not also have Mars Uranus? I'm trying to remember now. It's been so long since I looked. Yes, he does. Brian Jones. This is the thing. Brian Jones also had a Mars Uranus conjunction. So both guitar players did in the Rolling Stones. And what happens? It's so funny. Like, well, what the story I'm about to tell isn't funny. It's kind of gross, but it really sort of, in its own way, manifests in the song that Keith writes. Because the same night in Clearwater, Florida, we get this from Bill Wyman, the bassist, published his diary. So we know it's the same night, May 7th, 1965, the same night that Keith wakes up and writes this riff. Brian Jones brings a groupie to his room. And when she comes out of the room the next morning, she's got like a black eye or bruises or something like that. And the Stones are like, holy, fuck, this guy beat this woman. And they wind up sort of beating him and ostracizing him. They're sort of I mean, the Rolling Stones are not like angels, but they're not into this hitting women thing. And so he's got the Mars Uranus. He's having the recurrence. And so the song kind of signifies this, irrational rage, whatever motivated him to do this. The Mars Uranus transit is also opposite his sun, but it's a recurrence for him. And also the thing about Satisfaction for Brian Jones, because Brian Jones actually started the band, and Mick and Keith sort of gradually took it over, especially because they were the songwriting team. And Brian Jones had really wanted it to stay as a blues band, and Satisfaction is really them moving into this new form. So it's sort of like the band is slipping through his fingers, and he's frustrated. He can't get any satisfaction. Oh, sorry. I thought I was showing the chart that whole time. Here, okay, well, maybe other people weren't. Just here, I'm sorry. I thought I was showing. Here, Brian Jones has the natal Mars-Uranus conjunction, and here's the transit for that same night that Keith woke up with the riff in his head, and it's opposite his sun, like I was saying. Sorry about that. I thought I was sharing the screen still. But you can see it's a recurrence for both guys in the band. And while for Keith, it manifests in him writing one of the greatest guitar riffs in rock and roll history. And then for Brian, it's this very sadder thing that, I mean, at this point, he's only got 4 years left to live. He's going to gradually sort of deteriorate as the band slips from his fingers. He'll be fired from the band a month before he dies in his swimming pool. So, I know it's a sort of sad and kind of horrifying story. Yeah. Right. Right. That's always that Venus retrograde, what I call the red 5 in retrograde, the one that's coming up this summer, the one that happens in Leo, that also used to be in Virgo. Talk about music history. All right, here we go again. Sorry, I keep going to the sharing the screen, but this needs to this. That's when you know I'm really on fire. The glasses haven't even come off. So first, I'm going to go all the way back to 1927. Oh, I should be in the right file to do that. There we are. 1927. Um, oh yeah, there's Kurt Weill and Bertolt Brecht, of course, but that's not what I'm looking for. There's also Louis Armstrong, but that's not what I'm looking for. What am I looking for? I am looking for. Come on, guys, where is it? There we are. Bristol, Tennessee. Okay, now what happens is this week in early August of 1927, this is Tennessee where it meets the border of Virginia. There's recording music is only just coming out. You've got, radio and what have you. People are only just starting to make records. So there's sort of a call made out. The Ralph Peer of the Victor Talking Machine Company puts word out that he's going to record music from people who are, around in the neighborhood. And among the people who come in are the Carter family, Maybelle Carter and AP Carter, Sarah Carter. These are the first sort of country bluegrass music being recorded, everything that follows. Of course, their daughter is going to marry Johnny Cash later and all that. But there's a number of recording artists that are recorded in this period, in this week of 1927, as Venus is just going to go retrograde in Virgo. You can see it's 18 days from the station. But in terms of how I use the cycles, I include that in the red 5 interval. So you have the birth of country bluegrass music, which is, it's being, excuse me, sort of recorded and instantly sort of refined as a commercial product right off the get-go. So you get that. That's the first sort of red 5 I can point to. Then when you get, I'm not going to cover it all. There's a much longer version of this talk, but I'll just go to some of the highlights. Then if you go to the red 5 of 1959, you get the release of Miles Davis's Kind of Blue album, which, as I suggest, it was recorded a little bit earlier, but it comes out at this time. And this album is the first jazz album to use modal forms of composition. It's breaking away from the 12-bar blues changes. It's doing the same thing to jazz that'll later happen to rock and roll when you get metal, when it's like not just a sort of form of blues music anymore, but becomes sort of more stripped down and simplified. Yeah, although I mean, this album is, I mean, experimental maybe for a hot minute, but it from the day it's released until the present day, it's the best-selling jazz album in the history of the genre. It's and there's a lot. It's the kind of album where even people who don't like jazz like Kind of Blue. It's immensely attractive. Like even people who don't really like jazz like this record. It's a really lovable album. But you can see it's coming out in this Venus retrograde, and it really does revolutionize jazz. My favorite quote, Miles Davis. Yeah, but Birth of the Cool was a lot. I mean, that's sort of almost like classical music. That was the Uranus ingress into Cancer about a decade earlier. Oh yeah, he was quite young when he did that. Kind of Blue. My favorite thing about there's a great quote from Miles when he learns about modal jazz from George Russell, this composer, teaches him at a dinner party about modal jazz and what you can do and how it'll open up music for a soloist, because you don't have to follow blues changes. It opens up because the background is more simple. You don't have to be thinking around the backing. And my favorite quote, Charlie Parker, who Miles Davis used to play with when he was like 18. Charlie Parker had died in 1955, but Miles Davis says to George Russell, he says, "George, if Bird was alive and he heard about this, it would kill him." Which is just, hilarious. So there's that red 5. Okay, now the next one, and yes, I'm still giving you the short version of this. The next red 5 is the summer of 1967. This is when, of course, um, Sergeant Pepper is released, right? Just a little bit before the retrograde, but it's this. Well, yeah, his first album, although this doesn't go anywhere, he's a couple of years away from being anybody. But there's also the rise of Jimi Hendrix. He plays the Monterey Pop Festival as Venus is moving towards its retrograde, and then you get the summer of love. All the stuff that's going on. Whether it's Zappa, all you need is love. Give me a break. That's that was a international broadcast. The Stones were being busted for drugs. They were on trial, but it's the summer of love. Yeah, very much, very, very much. Sure. Well, I still have more to go. I don't. No, it's fine. I don't have a chart for it, but it's right in this period of August of 75 at the next Red Five, the next Venus retrograde. That there's an article written. I forget which magazine, not necessarily Rolling Stone, but one of the big rock magazines covers the fact that all these new upcoming bands are performing at this dive bar on the Bowery called CBGB's. And these bands have strange names like the Ramones and Blondie, Patti Smith Group and Talking Heads. And all of these bands sort of like immediately get caught into this, zeitgeist thing. And they're all about to, get record deals and release their albums. But there's that sort of that sense that there's a movement happening, right? And then finally, my voice is starting to go on me, but I have to take us back to one more Red Five, and that is 1991. Everything. It is the release of Bad Motorfinger by Soundgarden, and yes, as you mentioned, it's Nirvana's Nevermind album. It's Pearl Jam's. Yeah, yeah. Miles Davis died. John Coltrane and Cannonball Adderley, the three main horns on Kind of Blue, all died during Red Fives. I didn't even mention that. Yeah, yeah. They all. Yeah, 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 yeah. That's like a side note. Okay, the three horn players on Kind of Blue, which was released in a Red Five, they all died in Red Five. Coltrane died in July of '67. Cannonball Adderley died in August of '75, and Miles died in September of '91. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, just it's Blood Sugar Sex Magic, it's Pearl Jam's 10, it's the Metallica Black Album. They all come out this summer during this other sort of Red Five Venus transit. So, in other words, yeah, whether it's country bluegrass, whether it's the sort of the '60s Summer of Love and Hendrix, or whether it's the CBGB's Punk of '75, or the advent of the grunge revolution of '91, it's always in this Red Five Venus retrograde phase. Exactly. There you go. Yeah. So if you're a musician and you're trying to put out a record that's really cutting edge, this summer is a great time to do it and put yourself on the map and get a legacy going and all that, because it's yeah, expect it. I tend to expect that with the Red Five. The Red Five of 1999 wasn't necessarily so big for music, but it was huge for cinema. It was like American Beauty, Fight Club, Being John Malkovich, all that stuff of '99. So there does tend to be somewhere this sort of cultural explosion during the Red Five Venus retrograde. No, the only time I was in a band that released a CD, it was just before I became an astrologer. In fact, it was because I I was so depressed at how crummy the album was that I kind of had a mini sort of breakdown, and astrology kind of rescued me from it. Crushed Orchids is asking about Red 5. Crushed Orchids, on my YouTube channel, I have a video called Introduction to the Venus Synodic Cycle. It's 11, 12, or 12 minutes long, and it'll explain to you what I mean by a Red 5. But long story short, maybe I'll just quickly show an image. Yeah. The way I measure the retrograde is from greatest western elongation to greatest eastern elongation. So in that sense, it's here we go. I'll just am I sharing my screen? No, I'm not. I'll share my screen quickly so I can just show you what it looks like. Um, this whole circle represents 8 years, 8 years minus 2 days, which is the length of a Venus synodic cycle. And I can break it into a division of, excuse me, I can break it into a division of 10 or 20. The 10 is breaking it down by phase. Venus is morning star, Venus is evening star. And then the conjunctions happen in the middle of the blue phases, in the middle of blue intervals, and the middle of the red intervals. The red intervals are where the retrogrades happen. The blue intervals are where the exterior conjunctions happen. So if you think of the red interval, it begins with the greatest western elongation, and then it gradually catches up to a conjunction with the sun here. And then, by retrograde, and then keeps going while the sun goes forward, and eventually reaches its, it stations direct, starts moving forward and reaches its greatest eastern elongation before it becomes a full-on sort of morning star heading towards its next exterior conjunction. So the red 5 is where we get the Venus retrogrades that are currently in Leo. Like right now, as we speak, we're in a black 1 interval, and we're about to go into a red 5. Last October, when we had the Sun-Venus conjunction in Libra, that was the blue 2, when we went from a rising C to a setting A. So the red 1 is Venus retrograde in Aries, going to Pisces. The red 2 interval is Venus retrograde in Scorpio. The red 3 interval is Venus retrograde in Gemini. And the red 4 is Venus retrograde in Capricorn. And like I said, the red 5 is Venus retrograde in Leo. There's a whole pattern to it. But yeah, it's just sort of, I can't say, I mean, that's a developing concept. Coldplay are playing around the corner from where you live. Oh, try living somewhere else. Ha! Dude, I was like, no, I'm just joking. I never meant to cause you trouble. I never meant to cause you pain. Yeah, I'm just being a jerk. I hope they're pleasing you. Vinny doesn't seem to mind. All right. What was I saying? Yeah, this scheme that I developed for the Venus synodic cycle, it just helps us, talk about certain periods of time. These intervals only occur once every 8 years. It's 146 days long, once every 8 years. So it's a fairly small increment in time. So the fact that I could go from the Venus retrograde of 27 to 59 to 67 to 75 to 91, this is this recurring 8-year repetition that goes on with Venus ad infinitum. So this is just our sort of shorthand, so we know. If you watch the video, like I said, on my YouTube channel, it'll make a lot of sense. You're Yeah, you will get there. You basically get it. Bliss to be is asking if they're John Lennon because they're also a white two-face. Yes, you are John Lennon. You are John Lennon. You're also Bruce Lee and Richard Pryor and Terry Gilliam and all kinds of wonderful white twos. But it's a white two interval rising B phase. I invented this language, damn it, but even I sometimes screw it up. So there's intervals and phases. Intervals are the 20 division with the four colors, and then the phases are just the white and black, either evening star, morning star. When I first designed the system, I tried to sort of combine them into one, but then I realized no, I need the two measurements of the two different things, and then to combine them in that sort of double wheel the way I did. Well, yeah, my voice is going. How you doing? I have we reached it, or do you have anything? Yeah. Okay. Oh, this is good fun. Well, likewise, of course, Patrick. I I hope I haven't done all the talking. I'm not even aware. Is this this, okay? Well, this is what you get for doing a live stream with someone with Mercury and Leo. There'll be a bit of a mic hogging, but all right. Okay, I guess it's the way the vibe is. Sometimes you'll talk more. Sometimes I'll talk more. This has definitely been the most fun we've had so far. Wouldn't you say this is the best one we've done so far? Yeah. Someone did mention earlier they'd love to do more on sort of the synastry with bands within groups and stuff, which is that I've got loads of that kind of stuff. Yeah, I got loads of that kind of stuff. So yeah, we'd be happy to talk about some of that. We both love music and love talking about music and astrology. Um, as you can tell, I mean, we just we're we love all the arts and looking at the astrology behind the arts. Well, last time Neptune ingressed into Aries, it was literally the day the American Civil War started. So, that was a big bang. Um, yeah, but I think there were photographs taken of the Crimean War, which was a few years earlier, I think. I mean, that's, the American one, obviously, I mean, it really was an explosion of photography, certainly on the battlefield. But I'm pretty sure there were photos taken at the Crimean War, which is sort of like the European uh, adjunct to the American Civil War in a way. What, from 1861 to whatever? Yeah, yeah, he was composing during. Let's see here. I do have a Wagner file. Is a Wagner file on Sprockets? We show our Wagner files. Yeah, that's pretty martial. Kill the rabbit. Kill the rabbit. Yep. Yep. Right. Blade Runner, and Bat yeah. And even the Batman being sort of a shout out to the earlier Batman kind of thing. Mm, right. Mm, right. Right. Like you get to be Spider-Man. Yeah. 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 And you're absolutely right. As you saw, Wagner, his whole sort of oeuvre is Neptune in Aries, and I'm also reminded, like going back to the U.S. Civil War, the fact that the Civil War broke out. Then think of the theme songs. You know, John Brown's Body. It's all about like heroism. You know, the music is. I mean, Wagner is all about heroism and mythology, but so are that those Civil War songs. You know that mourn heroic soldiers and mourn John Brown, his martyrdom and that kind of thing. This is all very Neptune and Aries, I think. Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Woody Allen has another funny gag about that in one of his movies. Like some other person, he's recounting to a friend that someone was saying, "Oh, I like Wagner," and he's taking it as a sort of dog whistle that the person's anti-Semitic. But yeah, absolutely. Um, mm, right, right, Yeah, it depends who you are. Yeah, yeah, that'll make it a very different ingress into Aries than you would otherwise have. Yeah, than you would otherwise have. All right. Well, I'm spent. America, fuck yeah! All right. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. Freedom ain't free. It's a hefty fucking fee. No, no. I saw when we were talking about it, I put up some charts from Wagner's work. No, no, I mean, I was just confirming what you said, just sort of illustrating it visually. No, I think I mean, holy moly, we've covered a lot. We've gone all over the place. This is also what I was hoping, like, because we don't have like a set theme or format, that we just sit down and talk, and that anything can come up, and we're not trying to we just sort of let the horse out of the stable and see where it runs. And today I think was a great example of it working that way. But yeah, what's yeah. Well, or we might still have Spider-Man, Captain America, and an Iron Man, except instead of it being some huge studio, it's a movie you can make on your laptop because AI allows you, like you can really, you can make them. We're okay. We started off with this whole thing. I- I- Yeah, yeah. I mean, AI, someone said AI is sort of being overblown, but we're not far from when someone could actually, like, with the right vision and skill with the technology, could make something that comes pretty close to a Marvel movie, just on their laptop with no actors, no, just yeah, no. I just read an article this morning that reminded me that part of the reason Trump had his big rise was that the writers' strike of '07 allowed the celebrity. It happened just like it was when he had his regular Apprentice show. He did 6 seasons of it, and it was sinking. It was going to be canceled, and then the writers' strike happened, and he did his first Celebrity Apprentice. Right, in the middle of that strike. And of course, with no other TV going on, that's how the show got so big. And so, like, that writer's strike is this missing piece of political history that, like, when you put it in there in the puzzle, you're like, oh, because otherwise, like, what the hell was the? Yep, that's right. Yeah, 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 yeah. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. Yeah, exactly. If we don't pay writers, we get Trump for president. I mean, it's really not that outrageous a statement. I thought the biggest tragedy of it was we lost the show Heroes. And until I read this thing this morning, that was my opinion. But now I have to, well, like, okay, that was the second worst thing to come out of the. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah, I've been researching Trump quite a bit lately. I just sat through like a few of the 2015 debates, and just making a lot of charts and yeah, I'm finding some interesting stuff. When the whole thing was going on, as is my want, I don't usually want to pay attention while the thing's happening. I like to study things as a historian, not as a someone who's responding to the evening's news. But yeah, I'm finding some really interesting astrology there. No matter how terrible the person, the astrology is always fascinating. Um, yeah, yeah. At the time, yeah. There you go. Well, it's the price of an education. Yeah, yeah. And it did manifest, but it didn't over it was always this thing like, "Oh, this will be the thing that gets him." Like, you remember the whole grab him by the pussy thing, and everyone's like, "Oh, this guy's toast. This guy's totally toast." Like, no, no, just I'll say, uh, yeah, I'll say this. I also like in 2016. I think it wasn't even an astrological thing. I think I just couldn't, you know. But the main thing was I saw his chart and I was like, well, this is the main thing that really threw me off astrologically was I saw his chart and I'm like, well, this guy's supposed to be 2024. He's not supposed to be 2016. Like it's too early. He's supposed to be 2024. And I just like, no, that's not, and of course, if I just thought a little harder, there's only ever been one other president who served non-consecutive terms, Cleveland. And if that sort of possibility had ever just occurred to me, I could have arrived there. But look, there was so much between 2016 and 2021 that that we'd never seen before, as it is. So it was hard to imagine. But yeah, I always thought when I saw his chart, I was like, well, this guy, 2024 is his year, not 2016. And I think that's ultimately true, unfortunately. No, it goes. In 2025, that as the yeah, it doesn't matter. Okay, so the election isn't Uranus and Gemini, but shortly after that first inauguration, it'll be a Uranus and Gemini presidency. The ingress is powerful. Like so for him to yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, look, I hope not. I'm not I yeah. I think no, no, I think it's Uranus spends 7 years in a sign, and it's going there in 2025. And, look, I don't know how long the asshole's gonna live, but I think, if he gets elected in 2024, I know he's not technically not supposed to serve like another term after that, but look at who we're dealing with. None of the forget what the laws are or what I mean, he's under indictment and we're still like talking about him winning the election. So all bets are off as far as that goes. No, I just look, I think um, sure, the Uranus goes into Gemini in 2025 within a couple of months of the inauguration, but it's going to be a Uranus and Gemini presidency. And yeah, his chart just screams America to me. you know? And geocosmic Valentine. I hope you're right. I'm just going by the astrology. I'm just going, I mean, like, I hope you're right. This is not wishful speaking. I'm sorry, Patrick. I interrupted you. But every time I say this, there's always someone who's like, "What are you talking about? He's sick. He's gonna die. He's under indictment." I'm like, "Yeah, I hope so. I hope he dies right now." But no, yeah, yes, and no, this is a good point because who was the Gemini who had Uranus conjunct his sun in the 1860s? Jefferson Davis. Yeah. So, like, okay, yeah, maybe Trump doesn't win the election, but because of it, like, the South secedes and he's the head of this new Confederacy. Yeah, yeah, maybe it's that. you know, uh, yeah. I don't. Yeah, I don't. I don't. My impression right now is that neither Biden or Harris are on the Democratic ticket, but my impression is also that Trump is. I mean, on the Republican ticket, not on the Democratic ticket. That would be hilarious. I do actually think at some point, if he does get elected, Trump is going to do some kind of pivot on the right wingers in some way. He's he's always he's always he's always. I mean, anyone who gets in his orbit winds up getting burned. That's the other thing. But anyway, that's a topic for another show. No, I know. None of what I'm saying is none of what I'm saying is a defense or an endorsement or anything. I'm just saying the guy's chart looks like America to me. That's uh, well. If they've sat through 2.5 hours of this video, then they. Right. Right. I mean, he was a U.S. senator at the time, but he was. Yeah. He was living out of his Mustang. He was living out of his Yeah. Yeah, I that he's been trying and trying and trying to move into, yeah, and he got in. He loses the election or doesn't even run. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Beautiful astrology, and I think that's absolutely spot on. Well done. I agree. I don't yeah, you think she'll be I don't think it'll be her. I really don't think it'll be her. Okay. Okay, well, admittedly, I haven't, looked at her. I'm being I mean, I do have her chart, but I mean, I haven't been like looking at her chart and thinking about the transits in 2024. Um, I mean, her popularity is even lower than Joe's. She's got just like, no popularity. I I have a hard I mean, she would have to like, maybe she rescues like a baby from a fire or, takes down a school shooter or something like that. And her, like she'd have to do something really amazing for them to even look at her. I don't buy that because even I don't buy that because look, Obama was Obama, and even but Biden had a lot to do as a VP. Biden was a visible and involved VP. And I don't think Biden's telling Kamala to like cool her heels and not. I think she would step up, but I don't. I just don't. I don't see the Democratic Party going for her. Um, I'm interested. I find it interesting that Marianne Williamson has a Sun Uranus conjunction. So if she got the nomination, it would be two Sun Uranus conjunctions against each other in an election where Uranus is about to be a really big deal. So that's I you know that's that right, but Elizabeth Warren isn't running yet. Yeah, I she don't yeah. So who knows? Who knows? Um, but that was just an interesting thing. I mean, yeah, yeah, um, yeah. I mean, Elizabeth Warren sounds really good right now. Actually, like yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, at one point, it really seemed like she was going to be it. Sure. Oh yeah, I've looked at DeSantis. Oh, I mean, I guess we're going for hour three. Whoops, what's going on here? Do you? Didn't he go didn't he go to Yale? He went to one of these he went to a school that like it's kind of like with W, like he went to what school? Like they gave a diploma to him. But I want to say it's Yale. Right. I just want to say one thing about the what we're talking about here. Where am I going with this? Um, 440. Right. Um, okay. Red twos. Donald Trump and red twos. First of all, his older brother, born. Hold on a sec. Let me just get rid of this thing here. Go to just planets. Okay. So his older brother, Fred Trump, who was like, at first a hero to Donald and then died young. He was born 15 days before Venus retrograde. He's a red two. Okay. So that's red two number one. Jeff Sessions, who, started off in Trump's good book, but soon was not. He was his first attorney general. He's a red two. Venus, he looked like a Keebler elf, yes. 16 days after the direct station of Venus, he's a red two. Carly Fiorina, the only woman to run on the Republican, primary, she's a red two. Chris Christie, red two. Uh, okay, Steve Mnuchin, who actually, yeah, the treasurer, and he's the only one here who Trump, I think, still likes. Rand Paul, another guy who ran for the Republican ticket, not a fan of Trump. Megyn Kelly speaks for itself. Red two, Venus retrograde in Scorpio. Uh, uh, Ted Cruz. He's a red two. Venus just coming out of the retrograde, and Ron DeSantis is a red two. Trump's really got it in for the red twos. and when you look at me and when you look at I was just like I said, I was watching the debates earlier. um the second debate had 11 candidates, right? The first debate there was like the bottom seven and then the top 10. And then the second was 11. Out of those 11 candidates on stage that night, 7 of them were born in a red interval. Okay, because Jeb Bush is a red one. Ben Carson and Scott Walker are red 5s. You know, like it was just red, red, red all over the place. And like I said, Chris Christie, Rand Paul, Carly Fiorina, all red 2s. Ted Cruz, red 2. So it was a heavy, heavy emphasis on the red. And those debates, the first 2 debates were during the red 5 interval. You know, no, he's not, but he's got an ascendant with Mars in Leo and the Venus retro. Oh my God, I got to show this to you. The yeah, but like look at this. This is the transits he gets when he's that first debate. This is the debate starts, and one of the first questions is raise your hand if you won't support whichever candidate wins, no matter who it is. And Trump's like, yeah, no, and he's like, yeah, if it ain't me, I ain't supporting them. And he's the only one that does that. And everyone's just like, what the hell, man? And it's so funny to watch this stuff with hindsight. So these are his transits. It's a Venus retrograde with a Mercury and a Jupiter. His ascendant is you know, as you know, 29 here. I'll stick his ascendant in there. So yeah, he's not a red interval guy, but look at these transits. And this is the night he fights with Megyn Kelly. She asks him about women, and he's like, only Rosie O'Donnell, and she's like, no, you know. Yeah, exactly. All that stuff is here. And as I showed you, she's a red 2. And most, you know, half the stage is a red 2 nearly, you know, and most of the stage are red intervals. So he does. Out of all those people, okay, Marco Rubio was the only white interval. Lil Marco. Trump was the only black interval. And then John Kasich and Mike Huckabee were blue intervals. And then everyone else is red. Yeah. So that's why this interval stuff is really, really worth following. It's, it tells you something. And, you know, this, we're about to have Venus is going to be retrograde on Trump's ascendant again. Yeah. Leo, like last time. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, I'm done. You know, I mean, it was like, surely I'm done saying like, surely the Republicans wouldn't be that stupid. I'm done ever. I'll never utter that phrase. Like, you know, I mean, yeah, like it started with Reagan. It was like, I mean, like when Reagan was president, it's like, wow, he's like, this is a real, like, I can't believe they put this guy in the office. He's, you know, he's really ignorant. And you know, then the first Bush was president. He had Dan Quayle for a VP, who was stupider than Reagan. And then you know, um, then we got W, and then we got Sarah Palin, and it's just like it's like yeah, reverse evolution. It's a devolution. So yeah, that's where we found it. So I'm done. You know, trying to second guess how low the Republicans will go. But look, they're having a he's ahead. You know, he's yeah, he's in good shape, unfortunately. His father died. His father died, and his divorce with Marla was finalized. Yeah, that was coming out of the red. Venus was out of Leo by then, but yeah, that was more like October, November of 99. Yeah, the October, I think the start of it was in the red. Yeah, 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 yeah. And the thing about the 99 retrograde is that it would also be a Taurus perfection year, just like 2015 was, which means right. It means and it makes Venus the Lord of the year when Taurus is the perfection. Yeah, yeah, because of the wait, but he's not. He was in Taurus in 2015, so he's going to be in, I think, Capricorn this time, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. But the Jupiter, but it's the Jupiter is the same as 99. That is true. Yeah. 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 Wait a minute. Am I wrong about, hold on, I might be, I think I've just screwed something up. Let me double check my, uh, uh, um, 2016, or his birthday in 2015. Uh, he's 69. So 60, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, it's in. Okay, so 99, he wouldn't have been in a Taurus perfection year. That's where I made I knew I was making a mistake somewhere. This is his solar return for 2015. He's starting a Taurus perfection year. You see, Venus is already in his first house, but yeah, it would go retrograde here as of his birthday. Yeah. I'm sorry. I did that again. Thank you. Thank you. You got to remind me. No, no, it's my fault. Yeah, gently. We're talking about Trump. You don't have to do it gently. So yeah, yeah. So when it's in 2015, he's in a Taurus perfection year, which means that for the 2007, he would be in a Virgo perfection. No, he would be in a Capricorn perfection year, and then in 99, he would have been in a Virgo perfection year. That's the thing about tracing the Venus synodic cycle with annual perfections is it'll stay in the same element. It'll switch. It'll go between the three signs of the same element. So whenever he's in a red five, a year where there's a red five Venus interval, his perfected sign will be an Earth sign. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it wasn't time yet. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yep. Look, I mean, it's so funny when you watch these debates again. You see the commentary after, like after the first and second debates in 2015. The press people are just like, "Well, he sure blew it. Obviously, let's talk about John Kasich, or let's talk about how Scott Walker's doing." It's really like everyone's making these same presumptions. I mean, obviously, I don't think it's going to be the same thing. I mean, we know what a Trump presidency is like, but somehow, I think yeah, he's going to make it. Or if he doesn't, the other thing we're saying about the Confederacy is like, yeah, he becomes the Jeff Davis, because Jefferson Davis was a Gemini sun who had Uranus conjunct his sun when he became president of the Confederacy. and and trying to make the world sort of more balanced, you know. Yeah. Well, the world is deglobalizing, and largely, you know, because the U.S. is just not going to have its navy patrolling the waters. So the whole this you know open season on global trade that we've had for the past half century or whatever. Without with the, yeah, that's right. Yeah, 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 yeah. And ironclads and all that stuff. Yeah, a lot of stuff happened with naval stuff. Yeah. Oh boy. Well, we went in a whole extra hour bonus Trump hour at the end of all that music stuff. Like, um, that's the kind of Uranian anarchic lunacy that we sell here on our Sunday live stream. Isn't that right, Patrick? Okay. Okay. I I know you know usually astrologers are all like, you know, egotistical and argue with each other on social media like, no, I'm right, no, I'm right, but like this is my turn to go like, I hope you're right, I hope you're right. This is what I think, but I hope you're right. Yeah, I hope I'm wrong. Yes, and you know I could be. I am making some presumptions, but the yeah, yeah, it's his country, and the rest of you just live in it. You know. Yeah, yeah, and some people have said that, and I don't disagree that, you know, even if he's not the candidate, he's sort of he's the he's the daddy, you know, yeah, the yeah, yeah, the spark, you know. He's the something. He's the yeah. Yeah, look, uh, I mean, the last time, you know, I mean, it was the thing about secession was the real fear. I mean, of course, it was like the economic loss if the country broke apart and all that, but because Mexico was fighting off a French occupation, you know, Cinco de Mayo, that happened in 1862 in the middle of all this stuff, and the worry was that if the Confederacy seceded, that they would expand southward, like conquer Mexico and further possibly, and create this big slavery economic empire. And that's what the Union was really worried about, not just like, you know, the Confederacy breaking off on its own would have, like, you know, they would have lost the cotton money or whatever, but, you know, the Union would have survived otherwise. But there was this real fear that the Confederacy would expand south and become this greater empire that would be a big threat to the Union. And that was like where the real impetus to fight secession would be. Now, today, you know, if there was a similar kind of secession right down the Mason Dixie line or something, you know, resembling it, um, you know, that it's not the same. It's kind of the opposite. It's not a matter of the South expanding South. It's like we'll make our wall twice as big or whatever. You know, yeah, yeah. They don't want to expand South, so there isn't the same. You know, that there's not the same motivation to hold the thing together that there once was. So, you know, there's that to consider. Um, you know, it would definitely not be worth fighting a war over. Like, God, if you want to leave, just go. You know, yeah, yeah, like the way, yeah, like those points in relationships where two people simultaneously recognize that it's just can't go further, that it's going to destroy them both, and they that's just I don't know, I hope everyone stays healthy and happy. This is true. People talk about the US being this really sort of warlike country, but no country has fought like tried harder not to fight wars like they did like in the First World War, the Second World War. Like really, they did get dragged kicking and screaming into those things. Yeah. Who knows? Who knows? Right. Well, 3 hours. I got to let you go. I can hear screaming kids in the background. Thank you, everyone. If you stuck with us for the full 3 hours, congratulations to you. Most of you did. I think at our peak viewership, we had maybe 10 more people, but most of you really did stick with us. All right, let's do our last minute shilling. If you want to book readings with Patrick or myself, we both have websites and the means for you to do that. My website is nickdaganbestastrologer.com. There you go. So we're both available. We both would love to talk to you about your own charts, about music, about whatever it is you deem our fee is worth. You're the boss. You. I'm sorry I put you on the spot with Beethoven. I was not expecting the answer I got. I thought Beethoven. Yeah. Everyone can play Fur-Elise. I've been on the mountain here in Montreal. There's like a piano in the summer, an open piano, and it's like one person after the other goes up to this free piano and they play Fur-Elise. It's like, oh, and here's the fourth version of Fur-Elise I've heard in 20 minutes. Okay, do more lives. Yeah, Geocosmic Valentine, we are doing joint lives every Sunday afternoon. And I also do solo streams on Mondays and Fridays, which admittedly are not as much fun as when, I'm paired up with my good buddy Patrick. But it's a good time in its own way. And but yeah, thank you, Patrick. Have yourself thank you, everyone. And yeah, we'll see you next Sunday. If you like this, it'll just get better. All right. And away we go. Ciao.